the keeper of the time that we are good to go. So we'll just kind of get started while everybody wanders in. This is our first time doing this talk tandem, so I'm going to apologize in advance if there's any awkward pauses while we figure out whose slide it is. We did think about rearranging the order and just surprising each other, but we decided that you guys probably wouldn't appreciate that very much. So, welcome! Now that we're all full of snacks and goodies, we'll talk about awareness training, because that's a very exciting topic. I'm sure it will keep everybody awake all afternoon long. Plenty of seats in the mosh pit up here, guys. Yeah. So, quick obligatory company pitch. We work for SecureCon. That is a consultant-based company out of Alexandria. We are a sponsor this year. Please come see us. We have cool goodies at our booth. We do a lot across the financial services and the SCADA space. So that's kind of opposite ends of the spectrum when you look at the customer base. So I recently put myself through a interesting experience of co-authoring a book. And when I wrote the book, I really tried to focus on both ends of that spectrum. So, yes, I'm a glutton for punishment because I chose a topic that nobody wants to talk about anyway, and tried to make sense of it. So let's set the expectations here. Let's set the bar where it belongs. All right, this talk is not to sell you about awareness training, and it's not the greatest thing in the world. It will not solve all of your problems. We only have 50 minutes. There's only so much that I can do in 50 minutes. This talk is not to persuade you to think that awareness training is the only thing that matters. It's part of a process. We need to include it, but it's not the entire process itself. So what does that mean then? So an awareness program isn't really just that boring CBT that you click through as fast as possible once a year. I know I've done it a lot. It's okay. You don't have to raise your hands. I understand. An awareness program really builds on all of the defenses that you have in place in your environment. So the next-gen firewalls, all of those great tools, aren't going to do you a whole lot of good if you can convince your users to just bypass those technologies. So we have to use technology, we have to use education together to really start to identify the threat. So we've all seen the bad training, right? So part of being a consultant is that you normally have to take the security awareness training for every client you have. So this is kind of good for me because I get to see a lot of them, and some are good and some are not good. We've all seen the 50 slides of nothing but 10-point Arial font that nobody reads because you can't see it, first of all. Second of all, it doesn't address any topic that you're interested in. So it's just a race to see what's next. Some of the programs are so old that we were actually able to write scripts that go through it for us so that I don't have to click, because that's a lot of work. I like to automate things. So we just write scripts that will click for us. So, no. So if you have that kind of training in your organization, there's probably somebody who's written a script that will go through it and ignore it. So we're going to talk about how we address this as part of the process. So we touched on technology a little bit already. We've got fantastic firewalls, latest equipment, really great stuff. Except we forgot to patch everything except our people. So that's what we're going to try to focus on, baking the awareness program into your current security posture. Not starting over, not scrapping the security posture that you have, but building awareness into what's already there. I'm a big fan of recycling the material. That work is already good. You don't need to start over. So why do these attacks work anyway? What's the social engineering thing all about? Why is it that our technology doesn't protect us against this? People like being helpful. Most people like being helpful. It's human nature. We're taught from a very young age that we need to do unto others as we would like done unto us. If you see somebody who's struggling, usually your first reaction is to help them. If somebody is lost, usually your first reaction is to point them in the right direction. So while it's great and makes us great humanitarians, it also makes it very difficult for a business to keep everything secure. A lot of folks provide what we call free information. So we work with a lot of clients to prepare them for audit. So we teach them how to answer the questions appropriately. One of my favorites is, do you know what time it is? And of course, somebody in the room is going to look at their watch and say, yeah, it's 2:30. That's not what I asked. I asked, do you know what time it is? The answer is yes. So as humans, we tend to provide a little bit extra each time somebody asks us a question. And for social engineers, it's fantastic because we just use those little pieces to really build up a persona to make you think that we're either a vendor or we're an employee or just an innocent visitor, because we understand pieces of your culture already. So how do we stop that? There's really no clear-cut methodology for that, right? Because these types of attacks are going to be adaptive based on the environment that they're being put against. So when I really started to sit down and look at social engineering from a defensive perspective, it wasn't as easy, right? It's really much easier to come up with the attacks and to attack the environments. But coming up with something that helps them protect against it is very difficult. We've got stuff up here toward the front. You don't have to leave. So folks that don't read information security buzz, I did put together something called the Social Engineering Defensive Framework. And it basically builds on top of how social engineering attacks work, determining the exposure that your environment has. Sometimes this is referred to as reputational risk. How much information is leaking, let's say, from your website? Are there documents on there that have great metadata content? Can I fingerprint the applications that you run in your environment by analyzing the metadata of all the PDF files that you've posted, your marketing slicks and your annual reports? Are there photographs in those reports of what your employee uniforms look like? We utilized this a few weeks ago on a physical penetration test. We were able to identify their most current uniform based on last year's annual report. And then we were able to duplicate that uniform as part of our way to get into the environment.
An elaborate technique called looking on eBay.
Yeah, we bought the patch off eBay. They were not happy about that we could buy the patch off eBay, but we didn't even expense it. It was $1.35. We got space over here if you want to come over. Okay. So we'd like to do the value add when we can. So you really need to see what's out there. What kind of data can be used against you? And then you need to decide as an organization how to address that. Evaluating the defenses. Okay, great. There's bad data. We understand how social engineering attacks work. What do we have in place to fight against that? Do we have a tip line? Do we have a mailbox for things that look like spam? Do our folks know what to do if they see a suspicious person in the lobby or around the environment? So that's really where you start to baseline everything. You come in and you look at the basic defenses, and then you start to see where those weaknesses are. And you educate on those weaknesses, but you still have to include the basics. You still have to build upon what you've already built. So this is detailed in much greater length on the website. I just wanted to touch on it a little bit during the talk here. Streamline existing technology. All right, I'm a big fan of using what already works. We don't need to buy new blinky red light boxes. There's likely tools in your environment that can be configured to help you fight these kinds of attacks without spending additional money on hardware. And everybody kind of forgets about the incident response plan. Right? Nobody kind of remembers the paperwork. Okay, what happens if a phishing email does get through and somebody does get infected? What happens if there is an unauthorized person inside the building? What do you do? What are the appropriate reactions? So while all these other steps are great, if you don't have the plan in place and make people aware of the plan, then it's really for naught. So you really need to make sure that you're focusing on the actual policy in addition to everything else that's on this slide. So you can read more about that in detail in the book or on the blog there. You want this one? I think you should have this one.
Looks like me. Before we talk about that one, utilizing existing technology or streamlining existing technology. In a previous life, I worked for a educational system, a state college system, 4 universities, a handful of junior colleges, or community colleges, as they're now called. And the gotcha moment that we had is the organization who was spearheading the security awareness program for the school system was their distance education organization. We started defining what we needed to do. We were smart because we said, students need a different program than staff, and they need a different program than faculty, and they need different program than the state police who were on each one of the campuses. But one afternoon, it suddenly dawned on us that one of the things that we had, one of the resources we had available to us was the distance education program. So we could do it as courseware. So we could upgrade it and train, and repeat it, have it repeatable and scored and graded and recorded, as part of normal operations. So there wasn't the onus that you get in some organizations of, oh crap, it's the quarter. We have to send everybody the PowerPoint or the link to the PowerPoint. And they have to run through, and they get the certificate of completion they have to print at the end of it. There was none of that. It was all part of their normal, program. So, but one of the other things about this is, are we part of the program? Part of the problem, rather. So, one of the issues you get when you look at a lot of security awareness programs is the use of jargon. So you're telling people who are not information security people about phishing. You're telling them about, malware. You're telling them about phrases that may mean nothing to them. So do I want to pay attention to this? I'm told I have to do this. I'll just zone out. So we have to be more conscious when we develop these programs to take it the next step and really to help spell out what the issue is, how to explain it, and how to make it real for the people who are involved in it. So the secret sauce then becomes, we're not trying to make the recipients of the course security experts. We're just trying to give them awareness. And that reinforces the education. It's cruel but effective. So, teach them the basics and ask them how to ask for help, and have that help available for them. And, one of the things that, from the higher ed example I just gave, things you have to, to try to instill in these things, to keep people's attention, to get into the detail and the level of coordination that you want to do. There may be a cultural shift that you have to do. What we ended up doing was doing things as a story. So there was, the program we put together was a story within a story. So there was this general theme that would outline and reinforce some of the things we were taking, and then there was a sub-story that would go through and do the negative side of the story. And, that's how we made it matter to them. So keep their interest, and it was training in disguise.
Mine? Yay! Okay, mine. All right, so What are we defending against? We talk about awareness, and we talk about teaching everybody how we're going to protect ourselves and our environment. But do we really understand the threats that our environment might encounter? And that really kind of depends on your industry. If you're critical infrastructure, you're vulnerable to different attacks than somebody in financials. So there are, you've got your nation states, you've got your ninja hackers, because they dress like this so that you can identify them. And then you've got all these guys that just kind of do whatever they want to. They don't seem to discriminate very much. If somebody does something that upsets them, they just tend to roll in. It doesn't really matter what industry they're in. And then you've got something like this. But that's a different story. So when we understand what we're defending against, we can use that to build what our content will be based on our most prevalent threats. So what topics do we cover? If you're starting to build this from the ground up, it can be really intimidating, especially if you've never designed a program like this before. So we really need to move back to the basics on just day-to-day things that we do. How do you handle sensitive information? Do you use cover sheets? Do you use shredders? If you do a quick walkthrough of your environment, are there sensitive documents that are left out after hours? Are they only left out during the daytime? Are they locked in file cabinet? Are they marked appropriately so that they can be disposed of properly? If the most critical documents need to be shredded, there needs to be a way to mark them as such so that it's easier for the employees to understand that they need to shred those when they're finished. But we can't overclassify at the same time. We can't make everything important so that everything has to be shredded, because at that point people will just start hiding them in desk drawers and very not good places because they don't want to deal with the extra security steps. So folks that are handling sensitive information such as your compliance stuff, if you're utility, your NERC-CIP, your list of critical cyber assets, if these 16 machines get knocked offline, the power grid stops working, yeah, those are some kind of documents that you should probably shred if you're not going to use those anymore. Things that are selection sensitive. So in the government, source selection for a contract is kind of a sensitive thing when you start to bring the vendors in and have the vendor bake-offs. You don't want that information getting out anywhere. So while it's not classified, it's still sensitive based on the decisions that will be made around it. So you really need to be able to make a policy for documents that's easy to understand and not overly high maintenance, I guess is probably the word, so that you don't desensitize them to what they should and should not handle carefully. What about getting in and out of the building? Some environments have turnstiles, some environments just have the scary, angry security guard that stands there and looks for badges. Some environments have locked doors. What's okay? Are employees allowed to hold the door for each other? While it's a nice gesture and it's human nature, it's really not good for our security posture, because people like me will come in behind them and smile and say thank you, and then they've let them into our environment. What do they do if they observe someone that tries to tailgate in behind them? Is it okay for them to be approached? A lot of employees don't really challenge folks that try to tailgate because they don't feel that they're allowed to. So some of our clients that get gold stars for their security posture, if you try to tailgate in behind one of those employees, they'll turn around in the doorway and say, "You need to scan your badge and I need to hear it beep." Okay, this is good. We can work with this. So it's really important to not only establish those procedures, but to educate everybody on what they should be and what to do if they're not followed. What about suspicious emails? Everybody gets fishy-looking emails. Aaron's not in here, so I can pick on him. Sometimes they're even from FishMe. Sometimes they're not. You don't know until it's too late. If you did a quick survey of either coworkers or folks that work for you, you say, hey, what's the email address? What's the spam report account in our organization? Not many people will probably be able to tell you. Is it spamstop at, yourcompany.com? Do you have a spam account? Do they know how to report this stuff? Probably not. So that's something that really needs to be enforced often. Because all they need to do is just hit forward. They've already opened it, right? So instead of clicking on it, they need to report it. We talked enough about social engineering. I'm not going to dive into that too deep. What about safe web browsing? What should they see? What should they not click on? Again, we're not trying to teach people to be security experts. That's our job. That's what we are supposed to do. We are supposed to understand security. Everybody else in the workforce is supposed to understand how to do their job and ask for help when they need it. All we need them to do is to just recognize what doesn't quite look right and pick up the phone or write an email and follow the procedure to report it. Then it's handled by the folks that do know better and hopefully do not click on those links. So what does that mean exactly when you talk about understanding your audience? You know, the day-to-day and the terminology and the responsibilities of a SCADA operator, somebody who works in a power plant, is going to be very different from somebody who works at a front desk at an insurance company. You know, they all interact with different people in different ways. The training needs to be designed to really tailor to those folks. It has to be applicable to their daily jobs. And back to the terminology again. You know, you can't fill it full of buzzwords that are SCADA related or financial related or insurance related. It's got to be enough to where everybody will understand it. Want this one? Okay. You can have the mic.
Thank you. We talked about tailoring information for people. There's two aspects of that. One is tailoring it to their job and their responsibility and whatnot. And anybody work for the electric industry offhand? It's in SIP version 6, which is the regulatory component that's coming out a year from April. The power companies are going to have to comply with that. One of the pieces of that is a requirement for responsibility-based training. So this is actually becoming a federal regulation in at least that industry. The other thing to factor in there is people learn differently. Some people are visual, some have auditory, and some can yeah. Oops. Let's go back. So the visual, think in pictures and come up so quickly, often come up quickly so they think clearly. They usually talk fast. Who does that remind you of? Often look up and left and right when talking. Usually in professions that require confident, fast decisions or with specific procedures and put significant time into their appearance and surrounding themselves with nice looking things. Auditory is respond to sound. They usually have a way with words. They tilt their head to one side during a conversation and look from side to side when they're speaking. That could also be they're suspicious, but that's something else again. But they work where words and sound are primary focus. And they actually, I think we jumped one. So I'm not a visual person. So a visual person would use phrases like, I see what you're saying, how do you see yourself? That's a bit hazy to me right now. It's a bit vague, let me make this clear. All these phrases that have a visual, component to them. The auditory person would do, sonic references. It's as clear as a bell. Tell me more. They granted me an audience. Let me tell you. I didn't like the tone of his voice. Things like that. At least we have harmony. Then there's the other one, which I can't pronounce. That one. Thank you. which is, kind of somewhere in the middle. It's all about the right feeling. Look toward their feelings when speaking. Work in hands-on trade. That could be Italian. So. And so phrases in that thing is, let's sort things out. I can't handle the pressure. Let's stay in touch. Can you pull some strings? Kind of physical verb things. So, you want to take that?
Sure. So why that matters is you need to create training that really appeals to all three of these types of folks, because there will be all three of these types of folks in your environment. So if you create training that's just a bunch of pictures, the visionary folks are going to think that it's great. They'll blow through it, they'll get the concepts, and they're done. But the auditory folks, it doesn't come across so clearly for them. They need to hear things. So when you're starting to develop courseware and you're starting to evaluate some of the vendors and some of the products that are out there, look for options that really appeal to these different senses. And for fun, you can try to tag your coworkers. So the next time you're in the office, just kind of sit back and listen and watch their body language when they're talking in meetings and kind of see some of the phrases that they use. It's pretty easy to find the dominant sense for that person. And it makes communicating a lot easier once you know how to communicate with them. So my husband's a visual guy, and I'm an auditory person. So when he's speaking to me, and this is not just because I'm not listening to him, he's not here, so I don't have to cover myself. So when he's speaking to me, I literally turn my head and focus on something else that's over here because I'm trying very hard to listen. I don't have a hearing problem. Well, he might think that I have a hearing problem. But I'm focusing more on the words. So visual folks, to them, that's a sign of disrespect. How many times have your parents said, "Look at me when I'm talking to you"? So for a visual person, that's very disrespectful. But as an auditory person, that's the only thing I'm focusing on right now is listening to what you have to say. So once you can identify some of those, it's a little bit easier to communicate even with your teammates. So try it out sometime. There's lots of information online. Patching people. I like patching people. But it's difficult to explain because it's not like Windows patching. You don't just apply the service pack once and then you're good for eternity. People forget. I forget. It's okay. Everybody does. They like to see a lot of stuff that's from recent assessments, though. So if you've done a phishing assessment recently, or a physical test, or an infrastructure test, share some of those results. We did a phishing assessment. We sent out this many emails. 30 people reported this. 5 people clicked. This is good. These are some things that we can do to make it better. So including everybody in some of these results is really helpful, not just for morale, but they're training tools. So next time they see a suspicious email, they'll think, that Fish Me guy's back. Tom, he didn't click last time and I did. I'm not going to let Tom beat me. I'm going to report it before he does. So those can be used in very good, positive ways. They don't have to be negative all the time. Computer-based training is important, but it can't be everything. Again, the visuals and the auditories, it's okay for them, but there's only so many things that you can click through on slides. So for those of us who work in IT, this is incredibly basic. I fight with myself every time I see this slide, and I think, I should take that out. But for folks who don't work in IT and folks that don't work in security every day, this is not all common knowledge. This is one of their favorite slides because it highlights all of the basic components of a phishing email. What makes it look suspicious? If we tell them just to look out for suspicious email, they may not know what that means. That will mean something completely different to somebody who's not in the security profession. Anybody know where this goes? I don't either. I actually don't remember. It probably goes to Google. But when you use URL shorteners like this in phishing emails or in malicious Twitter posts and whatnot, how are they supposed to handle that? Are they supposed to click on that? Are they supposed to just not read it? You know, most folks don't know how to right-click on that and copy it and look it up online. Some of the vendors are actually starting to build tools into the browser that will expand that link for you and show you where it actually goes before you even have to press the button to get there. So there are some resources that can help with the technology. Now, this is funny because our business cards have a QR code on the back. It does. That practice does predate us, so it's not really our fault, but it's true. Don't scan those. You don't know where that goes. One of our favorite social engineering attacks is to make flyers for pizza coupons for targets who don't have controlled parking if their parking lot's just open. And we put all the flyers on everybody's windshield and then count the number of hits that we get on that website from people scanning it with their phone. We don't deploy any malware onto their phones. We're still working on getting phones included into the enterprise testing process. But just as a proof of concept, it's got a phenomenal rate of return. Just don't do it. It's that easy. We didn't fly commercially here. What about this box? All right, we all know what that is. I don't like Java, but sometimes we need it, occasionally. There are probably very specific situations in the workplace where they will see this box. So I made the mistake of doing some training for a client once, and I told them that they should never see this box at work. It turns out they needed it for their core application of what they do every day. So do a little research first before you tell people not to click these boxes, because then they won't work that day, because the security person said, don't click yes. So, and just, it's a quick inventory. Usually the major apps don't use them, but in this case they did. It also required IE7, which is a whole nother problem in itself. Home computers? Do you really need Java on there? If you don't need it at home, take it off. That's been my threat to my children because they're big Minecraft players. So if they're bad and their grades aren't good, or if they don't behave or whatever, I just tell them that I'm going to uninstall Java. So you can have Minecraft, that's fine. I'm going to uninstall Java though. So they learned very quickly that that meant no Java is no Minecraft. So now they're very afraid for their life of their Java install. Yeah, I don't know why they managed to make that off of Java. It's terrible. But at home, you know, if you're not using this, just don't install it. It's much easier. Want this one?
So, create an awareness website. You know, it's one of the things you want to do in social engineering your audience is to make it easy for them to report. So have a place they can go. If it can be done as a single link, you know, off like an internal space, that's great. Have an email address and phone number for reporting activities. Generate alerts for receive phishing emails or phone calls. Have links to corporate policies on computer use and physical security. Excuse me, antivirus information for home computers. You know, if you haven't gathered this, I don't think we probably stressed it enough earlier. You know, when you're telling people about computer security, don't make it just about, you know, the company. Make it about their data, you know, their activities. You know, it's so having information for them for their home computers in a easy location, you know, in the corporate website is good. Give them a security tip for the day so they're thinking about it, and give them links to articles on popular topics such as identity theft. Now, one of my favorite slides, you know, change all my passwords to incorrect. So when I forget it, it says your password is incorrect. Yeah, I make the O as 0, but so presentation is everything. You know, the annual awareness training, you got your little, shield. Where was that from again? A client. Yeah. So, having something, the shield is fine, has the name of the company and whatnot, and it's kind of unexciting. It's a shield, it's protection, it's law enforcement or something. But having something a little more dynamic, something that people can assimilate better is would suck them in better.
That's why we call it social engineering. You got to make it interesting and not short or long. You also want to avoid wordplay.
PowerPoint as a means to do security awareness is probably the worst, or one of the worst ways of doing it. But this is not a security awareness presentation. This is a security awareness presentation, something like that. So having guest speakers and demonstrations, make things real for people. Yes, I'm part Italian, so I have to do things like that. Keeping children safe online, that has nothing to do with the business, unless you're in daycare or K-12. But, being able to present that as a service for the employees. Mobile safety tips and tricks. Everybody's got a cell phone. Some people have multiple cell phones that they carry around with them. Make them understand what the risks are, just forwarding emails to themselves or forwarding mails from their phone, into the corporate environment. Tap and pay credit cards, what you need to know. Apple Pay is wonderful, sort of. Yeah. Online safety when traveling. I was in Shanghai a couple of years ago. We were in a Sheraton hotel, and the person I was traveling with, we were doing data center security assessments, in Europe and Asia. And just for grins, we thought we'd see what we could reach from the hotel Wi-Fi system. And we could reach everything. eBay, we could reach Twitter, we could reach, Facebook. What's wrong with this picture? So we figured we were being watched. We were in an American hotel in downtown Shanghai. So we shut everything down, we wiped the machines, and went on from there. So there are video clips, there are resources available that you can include in things like, in your awareness program. Restricted Intelligence has a library of different materials that you can put in, and they are, you can actually build storylines from some of the material they've got. The SANS Securing the Human link is another good source. And have contests, it's reward good behavior. People like things. You don't necessarily have to give them $1,000 for reporting an email, but giving them points. Some companies have points that let you, either convert to dollars on the corporate credit card or get something from the company store or from a catalog. Giving them, an incentive for reporting is good. One of my favorites is the homemade, awareness video contest. Solicit, the employees to help you do your job and develop things. Excuse me. And then a monthly drawing for those who report, potential phishing. Again, the idea is to get people involved, not just be a recipient of the awareness training.
I'll take the psychobabble. Can you tell this one's my slide? So neuro-linguistic programming, it's kind of been around since the 1970s. It's very, let's use the word controversial in the psychology world. You've got folks that believe it's the best thing ever, and then you've got folks that believe that it's the biggest scam ever, what have you. And they're both right, to a point. It was originally designed to help folks who have been through traumatic incidents, sort of like PTSD before it was PTSD. But the way that this really works is it uses anchors to tie certain emotions or certain memories to stuff that you see around you every day. So when you're developing your training material and your awareness program material, you want to try to stick with a certain color, because that's a visual anchor. So when they see this certain shade of green that you've always included in your security material, it makes them think about security. So I had some not so appropriate slides for ISSA in here, which I removed. But let's think about, let's use one that's somewhat safe, the GoDaddy girls. Right, there's a certain green, and they use that visual anchor, right, to make you think about their business. They normally use a certain jingle that you associate with their business, and a slogan, and so on and so forth. So this kind of stuff is used a lot in the marketing sense, but when we're doing awareness training, can't talk anymore. That's what we're doing. We're selling our own material. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of the marketing folks can help you with this part. So try to keep some of the colors consistent across the board when you're putting material out. And if you're going to do phrases, always consistent phrases. And I think we are out of time. 2 minutes? Okay. 2 minutes. Okay, cool. Anybody have a question that will take me less than a minute and a half to answer? Yeah. Yes. Which one can I tell you about? I can't tell you about both in a minute and a half. Alright, I thought so. He just asked if I had it, not if I'd share it. Let's do the success story really quick because I like ending on a positive note. So we do have a client that's kind of like they've kind of set the bar for awareness training. And they're a couple of thousand folks. About 3,000, I think. And they do a lot of phishing exercises. Every month they're testing their own folks. They've got materials. They've got all the good stuff. And their folks really understand security and what that actually means to their environment. They will stop you in the doorway if you don't have a badge and tell you to go talk to the security guard, which is great. So they brought us in to do a phishing assessment from the outside to see if we could actually, A, get them to click on something, and B, get some nice safe malware onto their machine so that it would give us access to their machine. So I did all the research. I bought a special domain. I bought the SSL certificate that goes along with it, right? Because hackers wouldn't use things like SSL with a valid certificate. That wouldn't look suspicious. That would look normal. So we set it all up. I researched the folks that I wanted. I sent 5 emails. Normally when you do these things, it's several hundred to 1,000 because you want a certain percentage of the workforce. But I sent 5. That's all I wanted. So I sent 5 in the morning, and almost instantly I got 3 back. 3 shells. Awesome. This is going to be so much fun. I can't wait to get started. And I'm 10 minutes into this, just starting to really get into these shells and seeing what's on these machines, and they all 3 drop. What is this? So I'm checking all my stuff to make sure all my machines are still working properly. So the 3 that clicked really gave me a good time. The 2 that didn't click picked up the phone. So within 15 minutes of when I hit send on all 5 of those emails, the folks that didn't click had picked up the phone, reported it, worked through their help desk and with the security people, and they pulled those 3 machines completely off the network in 15 minutes. So that's my Uber success story.
I have a quick corollary to add to that. You said good things about PowerPoints. That company's awareness program is PowerPoint.
It is. They have more than just PowerPoint, though. It's beyond the PowerPoint. Okay, we're getting the shut up signal, so thanks for having us. We'll be at the SeerCon booth if you want to come by and say hi.
Thank you.